There was a time this season where it was a lock that Matt Eberflus wouldn't return in 2026. But is that still the case? We'll debate next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the number one sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and we are answering your Twitter questions today. And we got some really good ones, including Trayvon Diggs, his future in Dallas. We'll talk about him returning to practice. We'll talk about some veteran defensive ends and what the Cowboys plan on doing there. But Landon, we actually got quite a few questions about Matt Eberflus, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, because I mean, listen, coming out of that game against the Cardinals, I think it was a lock that Eberflus and the staff would all be gone. But after the last 3 weeks, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to forget what happened early in the season, right? And I don't think you just completely wash that away because the Cowboys defense has played better. Though I do think the idea that you inserted some more talent onto that side of the ball and suddenly the defense gets better, that also has some merit to it too. And that maybe, Eberflus was put behind the eight ball. I think we can all agree that Eberflus was put into a terrible position at the beginning of the year, because he didn't have anything to do with that Parsons trade. I guarantee you he didn't have a say in it. And I think that it was a terrible spot to be put into when you build your whole defense around a single player that is obviously an all-pro, top of the league type player, and then suddenly that player gets traded away. So he definitely got put into a terrible situation. However, there was also play by certain other players around that defense that was subpar and that, shouldn't have been allowed on the field. And obviously at the end of the day, the defense coordinator is responsible for that. I think that the data points we've gotten these last 3 weeks are very informative. I think with the defensive line that this team has, and I even heard Stephen Jones say today that they would love to try to keep all three of these defensive tackles moving on beyond this year. So maybe there's something here. And I'll add in the other aspect of it too, is that part of the reason we got here in the first place is because the Cowboys kept changing out defensive coordinators, right? And we haven't allowed a single unit kind of to sit and develop into a system for more than a year since we had Dan Quinn. So I think that I may not feel 100% about bringing back Eberflus, but I think when you consider the idea that it's been more than good enough these last few weeks and the continuity aspect of it, just having a defensive coordinator for a second year in a row, especially when you're going into a year that you think could be a Super Bowl window for you, I kind of just don't want to start over with another defensive coordinator. So I think if that last part wasn't involved, I might still be a little bit more on board with letting go of Eberflus. But I think combined with the fact of what you've seen these last few weeks, they've shown you a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel that's maybe schematically isn't the problem. And the fact that continuity is so important here, I kind of think that he should be back next year.
I honestly think a lot of it depends on who's available, right? Like if there's a
Sure.
name out there that is just a clear upgrade, I think the Cowboys should explore that. Now, I don't know if there's any guys like Dennis Allen. Like, he was just in over his head as a Saints head coach, but he is born to be a defensive coordinator. I don't know if any of those guys are going to be available. Like if Cleveland moves on from like Jim Schwartz, maybe that would be somebody that you could bring in. So again, it's going to depend on the names available. I think in a vacuum, though, I think they probably should stay with Eberflus, maybe change out some of the positional coaches. And one of the reasons why I feel that way, Landon, is that what you usually see from Eberflus is really bad defenses or well below average defenses the first year that he's there, and then some gradual improvement. Like you go to the Colts, 2019, they were 18th in points. 2020, they were 10th. 2021, 9th. Then he gets the head coaching job with the Bears in 2022. They were 29th in points, 12 in points, and then they were playing really well in 2024 before he got fired. The defense fell way off. So you do generally out of Eberflus see a defense that gets better the longer they're in that system. But if there's somebody that's more creative out there and more imaginative that can, maybe do some different things with blitzing and coverages, I wouldn't be opposed to that either.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm at the point now where it's going to need to be somebody who's a real needle mover for me. Like, I'm not doing this for willy-nilly for someone who might be even just a slight upgrade on Eberflus, because I think the continuity aspect of this is important, and I think that that's been proven out over the last 3 defensive coordinators, where it's taken a little while for them to kind of take on the style and the system that the defense coordinator brings. But and again, like I think for the Dallas Cowboys, all energy needs to be pointing towards creating a Super Bowl window for 2026. I mean, right now we're in the middle of the season. Let's finish the season. But once we get into the offseason, every step needs to be taken with the idea of, hey, we're working towards winning the Super Bowl this coming year. Like, and I think if that's the case, then I understand the idea of long-term improvement by trying to maybe upgrade that position a little bit. And again, someone who's in Eberflus's situation, right? Like you just mentioned, Jim Schwartz, another guy that's like this, a guy who's gotten his head coach shot already, right? Yep. Someone that if you like, hopefully you could hold on to for multiple years at that position and pay nicely and keep around. I would need them to be a pretty significant upgrade and a pretty significant scheme, alignment sort of situation. Because if you're talking about blowing this all up to start over again next year, I think you fall into that trap that we've talked about, a couple of these off seasons, where your front office, your coaching, your player personnel, they're not aligned. The timeline isn't lining up. I think right now that they're in a good spot where everything is kind of lined up for the first time in a long time. Don't mess that up by getting a little bit greedy. Now, if there's somebody who's a huge needle mover, that's a different story.
But I just can't even think of the name. Like, the only name out there is like, hey, if the Vikings decided the season was bad enough, they're moving on from Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. Yes, that's an upgrade. But the Vikings aren't doing that, right? And you go through these teams, and there's just not a lot of like defensive head coaches right now in the league.
Yeah.
And the ones that are out there probably aren't going to be available. And I do think there's going to be some young coaches out there who are going to get shots to be defensive coordinators that I would be interested in, again, on random NFL team. But for a Cowboys team that's going to try to really compete in 2026 and 2027, I don't know if you can go through the growing pains of having, like, I'll give you an example, like Al Harris, right? Al Harris has done a great job in Chicago with those cornerbacks in the secondary. He would be a first-time play caller, and I think that brings a lot of risk when I don't know if you can afford it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I certainly don't have any interest in bringing in a first-time NFL defensive coordinator play caller, because like we just talked about, there's just too much on the line for us to have to sit through another kind of learning curve, through the first 6 seasons while this team has to learn another defense. Like, it's going to need to be a pretty compelling case. And like you said, I can't come up with a compelling case right now that would make me feel like I need to move off of Eberflus, because honestly, if Eberflus, like you talked about, like if he's following that same trajectory that he's done the last 2 stops with his defenses, then I want to be on board for when the things start to kind of clear up and get a little bit better, as we've already started to see. And really, like, Eberflus may be the most, well-known and best qualified candidate of the ones that are even available out there. So I think you just ride another year with Eberflus and try to improve the personnel that he's playing with.
All right, let's talk about the Cowboys defensive end room, because this is a position that's going to have a lot of change over the next 7 or 8 months. We'll tell you what we would like to see the Cowboys do next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift, and you can generally feel it. I mean, I know watching Cowboy games, like you can feel when these games start to move. A receiver gets hot, like George Pickens or CD Lamb. The defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every single snap, every drive, and every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit fanduel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game that moves fast, so you can too. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'd also like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. Lana, let's talk about the Cowboys defensive ends. We got a question from Gorn who wants to know which veteran defensive end should the Cowboys bring back next year, and what should this defensive line look like?
Yeah, so I mean, really, you kind of have to just look at who's under contract first, right? Like, I know Clowney's on a 1-year deal, so he's not guaranteed to be back. But at the same time, Clowney has been this kind of late in the off season, early in the regular season signing. These last few years, kind of mercenary style. So I think we can agree that we're not necessarily going to re-sign Clowney this at the end of the year. We're probably just let him walk, with the idea that if we feel like we need him, we probably can still go and sign him,
Yes.
without too much trouble. I tend to think that you bring back guys like James Houston, who's already, I think, under contract next year, if I'm not mistaken.
I've got his.
Yeah.
The Cowboys made a great deal here.
Yeah.
They signed James Houston back in August to a 2-year deal worth $2.1 million total.
Total, not
Total.
per year. Total.
So next year, his cap hit next year is $1.1 million with zero guaranteed.
Which is, there's a possibility he may get $100,000 per sack next year based on the way he's played this year. So, I mean, you're going to bring back Houston. Obviously, Ezeiruaku is going to be on the team. I don't know the deal with Fowler though.
Those are their only 2 defensive ends under contract for 2026. That's it. That's a whole.
The Fowler was the only other one that I thought about. So yeah, he's not there. So really, those are the only 2 guys. I think. Look, Sam Williams is probably not coming back, I would imagine. I mean, just based on, or at least not.
I'd be shocked.
Yeah. I'd be shocked too. It would have to be on a kind of very, very team-friendly deal of some sort.
The only way is if he's just not getting any kind of market, and it's like, hey, come back to Dallas on a 1-year, $2 million prove-it deal. Show that you can stay healthy. We'll give you some snaps.
And he'll play some special teams for you as well. And, he'll come in and play his 10 to 15 snaps. Yeah, I think that this is a position the Cowboys need to seriously look at it in the draft. I mean, I think you've clearly gotten something in Ezeiruaku. Let's go pair him up with another, Jadeveon Clowney comparable defensive end, right? Another big body defensive end that's an athlete. Maybe they could give you a little bit more pass rush, even though Clowney's been fantastic in that regard. But just someone like that, and then if you need to, maybe you still sign Jadeveon Clowney as you get into the regular season, right? So this is a position that you've only got, like you said, only got 2 guys here. So maybe you also re-sign a Fowler. See if Fowler's interested in coming back on 1 more year, right? Or go out and get a different veteran, big body defensive end that you feel like actually might be worth paying a little bit more money and will actually come into training camp and kind of be a part of the team, early. So defensive end so wide open. I think you're kind of going to have to mix and match all approaches in order to get what you need from a position where you're going to be heavily rotating. And then I think the last element to kind of consider here is, we talked about in the first segment, there's some interest in bringing back these 3 defensive tackles. How does that change the role of the defensive end on this team next year? That'll be an interesting part of this equation.
Or maybe you do the Tyrone Crawford thing to Solomon Thomas and say, who's also under contract next
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
And hey, let's maybe have you cut a little bit of weight. I know you like to be, all rocked up and with the muscles, but maybe cut a little bit of weight. We'll have you be a base defensive end, and that's
Yeah.
how we can get you on the field more. If I had to guess, I think the Cowboys will sign one big name is wrong, but like one veteran defensive end that I think everybody knows, whether that's a Fowler or a Clowney. They'll backload the roster with like former high draft pick guys that haven't worked out, like name your guy Cleveland Farrell or something like that, right? Like just to get them to the draft. I think they spend a first round pick on an edge rusher to pair with Donovan Ezeiruaku. And if things are going poorly, you give Jadeveon Clowney a call like the day training camp ends.
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily have to draft a defensive end in the first round. You obviously, if you don't, I mean, you're missing your second and third round picks next year. But I don't think that I think it's a position that if you're kind of changing the angles on how you're attacking the defensive line a little bit, that you could cobble together the defensive tackles that you've got, the defensive end that you have. You already have a guy that you would like to take the role as your number one pass rusher next year in Ezeiruaku, right? And then Houston could be a guy that is like, your number two off the bench behind
he's
him,
like your
right?
fourth pass rusher, right? That plays 15 to 20 snaps. Yep.
So I think you could, if you could go out and get either a middle to high range veteran there, or you could draft a first round pick. I think either one of those probably gets you the talents you need to have a healthy pass rush going into next year, right? And at least that's a start. You probably still need to fill out some depth pieces, obviously, and that could be veteran or free agency, or a veteran free agency or draft. But I think if you're looking for those that other high end, pass rush piece, your second rusher, right, on the edge, I think you can either probably fill that position in free agency or with the draft pick if you absolutely feel like you love someone somewhere in one of those two picks.
A couple of predictions here. Number one, I think the Cowboys are going to be a destination for teams or for players that want to come in on a 1-year deal, like what Fowler did or what Clowney did, because when you've got these three defensive tackles, and I think they'll all be back, and you've got depth on the defensive line, it's really easy to come in, know that you're going to get single blocks all the time, play on pass rushing downs. And I think with the success that Clowney and Fowler are having, I think you're going to see more of these players want to come play in Dallas. It's also a great place to live, and you're playing in good weather. I think that'll be interesting to some of these guys that are like in their like middle 30s or so, just want one more contract. I also wouldn't be surprised, Landon, if the Cowboys go out and spend big money on a free agent pass rusher. And there aren't a ton of guys out there, but I'm looking at two names. Jaelan Phillips, who's currently playing with the Eagles. I think the Eagles, I think the Eagles, they have no chance of re-signing him, right? And I think Philadelphia knows they traded a third round pick with the idea that they're going to get a comp pick for him. Jaelan Phillips, he's only 27. That's somebody that you could spend big money on. And the other one is Joey Bosa, who's actually having a really good season in Buffalo right now. I think he's getting like $15 million a year, which is a lot, but it's not breaking the bank. He's like one of the top players in the league in pass rush win rate. Again, he's 32. He's probably going to cost you 10 to 12 million a year. I just wouldn't be shocked if they go out and pay big money for a guy like that to pair with Donovan Ezeiruaku.
I wouldn't be shocked either, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they decided to go the draft route, right? Because here's two other data points to consider here. There's a lot of defensive ends in the latter part of the first round, just as it lays out right now. The inventory is going to be full, right? And of all types of pass rushers. And then the other thing, considering that they may keep those three defensive tackles, that's going to get kind of pricey. So maybe they don't want to go out and spend even more money, considering everything else and Pickens and all the other stuff they're spending money on. Maybe they don't want to go out and spend big time money on a free agent pass rusher.
Can I get my prediction real quick on the defensive tackles? Because
please.
Osa Odighizuwa and Quinn Williams are obviously going to be here. You have Solomon Thomas. You have Perrion Winfrey under contract. Kenny Clark has no guaranteed money left on his deal. I believe he's only going to be making, I think it's like 12 million. The cap number itself is really high. I just won't be shocked if Kenny Clark gets a new deal this offseason where it's like 2 years for 30 million with 20 million guaranteed, and the cap number gets lowered. but he actually gets paid a little bit more.
I think that's destined to happen. But
Yeah.
I still think I agree with that. I still think even with that, considering everything else that they still have to do, including Pickens and everything else, I would not be shocked if they decided to try to cheapen the defensive line, get the most bang for their buck there by drafting, especially again because of the inventory that you're seeing coming out of the draft. If they try to do it through the draft because it's a lot cheaper.
I know Mel Kiper said on Monday that the defensive end is the best position in this year's class. And that lines up really well with the Cowboys' needs. All right, let's talk about Trayvon Diggs, who returned to practice for the Cowboys on Monday. What does his future look like in Dallas? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want to get something that's meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every single time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories, because Aura isn't just your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before even gifting it. So when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Got one from my mom last year. She absolutely loved it with all of her grandkids. So easy to set up. So when she opened the box, it's right there ready to go as soon as she plugged it in. And for a limited time offer, you can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That is auraframes.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusive to Locked On Cowboy listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now and get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, we actually got quite a few questions about Trayvon Diggs, who returned to practice on Monday. According to Diggs, he's been dealing with multiple knee injuries, including some soreness in both knees. He wants to play on Thursday. The Cowboys haven't announced yet what's going to happen. My gut tells me that they're going to maybe hold him out 1 more week just to give him a little bit more time off. But what does the future look like here for Trayvon Diggs? Because this is another one I can't figure out.
Just because it doesn't feel like we've gotten a lot of straight answers on the situation. I mean, you're going with your gut. My gut tells me that he won't be back next year. Yeah. I don't know what's gone on between Trayvon and the front office or the medical staff, or how Trayvon's relationship has changed since the Micah Parsons trade, or how Trayvon's relationship with the Joneses has changed since the offseason situation, since the last knee injury. But none of it seems positive. None of it feels positive. I mean, everyone's saying the right thing, but the results are obviously not what anybody wants. And so I just feel like, that he has no more guaranteed money here. You feel like there's some animosity, between the front office and him. I just can't imagine him being on this team beyond this year. And if he is, then I think, then we clearly didn't get a very good picture of what was going on behind the scenes. Right. So I think without any kind of other, information about what exactly went on, it sure doesn't seem like there was a lot of positivity between these two. And I imagine they're headed for a divorce.
How much of this even depends on him? And I ask you that because, like, if Shavon, Revel and Caelen Carson and Reddy Stewart are adequate the rest of the season, and you've got Deron Bland, who's starting to kind of round back into form, do you even bother? I mean, the Cowboys can save over $15 million by designating him as a post-June 1 cut. And if those guys are just playing well enough, maybe you just play the young guys. And, cornerback is a position where you want young guys that can run and that can tackle. Even if Diggs comes back and plays okay, like he did at the higher points of the season, I wonder if it even is going to matter.
I think it depends on what version of Diggs we got, right? Are we going to get potentially a better version of Diggs than what we got earlier in the season now that he's had a little bit more time to kind of heal a little bit?
Well, what if
And
he's good, but
Mhm.
not great? Like he's not what we saw like in 2021 or 2022. It's more like on the higher end of what we saw earlier in the year.
I think, the easy way to kind of solve the what if game is just to compete, right? Like to
Yeah.
put them out there at practice and see who the best cornerback is, right? And look, again, like I understand it's easy to look at what Trayvon Diggs did earlier in the season and go, he's cooked. Like there's no reason to bring him back. But the truth of the matter is that if your defense coordinator is feeling confident enough to start playing more man coverage, specifically press man coverage, I mean, Trayvon Diggs can do that when he's
Yeah.
healthy, or at least he does when we've seen him. So he probably would be a better option if, like, let's say you get into a position where you win this game against Detroit and it's on, right? Like we're going for it. We're trying to win out. I think there are certain situations where you'd be like, let's split the time between Revel and Diggs, right? Like I understand you want to get Revel's snaps out there, but I think there's obviously a world out there where Diggs may be a better cornerback right now to go out there and play the snaps that you have in front of you. So I think it depends on the situation. I think it depends on how Diggs comes out of this injury situation as well. But I think in general, this relationship is till the end of the season and then not long after that.
I think Diggs' attitude is also going to play a big
Yeah.
part of this. If he comes out and it's a lot of like loafing and not wanting to tackle, you've got other guys on this team that are willing to tackle. And I think that's a big reason why your run defense has improved over the last couple of weeks. It's all up to Diggs. It's all on the table for him. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check us out on YouTube. Follow Landon on X at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Wednesday.